Ladies and gentlemen, the time has come for New South Wales to look forward rather than backwards. For far too long, New South Wales business leaders, community leaders and politicians have been caught up in a culture of negativity and complaint, or worse still, apathy and acceptance. Today, we set out to change the agenda, change the debate and change the way that we do things in New South Wales. Today, we want to talk about the future. Today, we want to talk about the ideas and solutions that can help New South Wales reclaim its place as the economic engine room of Australia. We recognise the problems and we don't deny them, but we want to focus on solutions. New South Wales Business Chamber's 10 Big Ideas to Grow New South Wales is about exactly that, growing New South Wales. The 10 big ideas are about seizing opportunities to grow our skills, strengthen our infrastructure, encourage confidence and prepare for the future. In our limited time this morning, I will briefly walk you through our 10 big ideas. From the outset, however, I would like to say that this about these 10 big ideas. They are not our ideas, they are your ideas. They were developed through the debates and discussions we held in our policy committees, in the 4 New South Wales Reclaiming First symposiums, from our council meetings, from local chambers of commerce, and through our interactions with other industry and community groups. We say very clearly that there is no copyright on these ideas. In fact, we hope both sides of politics pick them up and claim them as their own. Surprisingly, these ideas cost very little or actually pay for themselves in a short period of time. However, what they do require is a willingness to question the status quo, a capacity to challenge vested interests, and a desire to make decisions based on the long-term and broader public good. We want these 10 big ideas to start a meaningful debate. That's why we invited a range of groups to participate in this process, many of whom are not natural allies. But we took the view that our respective histories are not as important as our shared future. We witnessed the potential power of this collective focus, most recently when groups as diverse as the Property Council, civil contractors, infrastructure partnerships, NCOS, the state's peak social services group, Unions New South Wales, the New South Wales Government and the opposition all joined with New South Wales Business Chamber to fight the federal government's plan to cut $2 billion from our state's GST allocation. New South Wales Business Chamber launched, or should I say attempted to launch, a billboard in Brisbane which said, "Welcome to Queensland, subsidised by the taxpayers of New South Wales." Now this was a campaign that was backed up by an email campaign and a postcard campaign. What isn't well known is that at our request, Unions New South Wales adopted our campaign and emailed its membership, encouraging them to also get actively involved. In the end, this collective action resulted in a much better deal for New South Wales, and it is a timely reminder about what can be achieved in this state when we work together for the greater good. Let's now turn to our 10 big ideas. The first thing that I want to highlight about the 10 big ideas is that they are costed. They are a mix of savings, new spending initiatives and tax cuts. They provide a total of $1.9 billion in tax cuts, and yet they still improve the budget bottom line by at least $670 million over 4 years. Our first big idea is to ensure that taxpayers get better value for money by auditing government services and performance. The New South Wales Government manages over 300,000 employees and has an annual budget in excess of $55 billion. Small improvements can have a dramatic impact on the bottom line. For example, a 2% improvement in performance could deliver taxpayers an extra $1 billion each year. It is too easily forgotten that a dollar wasted in one area is a dollar that can't be spent in another. We should be willing to test the performance of government and the quality of its services by undertaking a whole-of-government audit using local, interstate and international experts. I believe a commission of audit in place for only 3 years could be a real driver of reform within state government. Everything should be on the table, including public sector work practices, the costs and quality of service delivery, opportunities for contestability of services, the performance of local government, and long-term budget sustainability. Our second big idea is to create jobs by cutting employment taxes and red tape. The New South Wales Government currently has a modest payroll tax reduction plan in place. The government has reduced payroll tax from a peak of 6.4% in 2001 to 5.65% now. However, we believe the government's payroll tax reduction program should be extended beyond the next election and accelerated. Under our plan, only 60% of the savings generated by the Commission of Audit would be required to fund these further cuts to payroll tax. Our plan will result in New South Wales matching Victoria's payroll tax rate of 4.95% by 2014-15, and the cost to the budget over that period would be $1.9 billion. Further, we propose that the ATO should act as the collector of New South Wales state taxes. This reflects the concern of small business regarding the levels of taxation red tape. We think it makes sense for business to deal with one tax collection agency and not two. By having a single tax collection agency, we can integrate all aspects of the various tax systems. Now, this isn't about a federal takeover of state taxes. It is about using federal infrastructure and expertise to act as a tax collector for New South Wales. As a final point, we are all awaiting the release of the Henry Review into Australia's taxation system. Our concern is that both sides of state politics will respond to the political pressures of an election year and will therefore take a short-term approach to tax. That is why we believe the bipartisan Public Accounts Committee should determine the New South Wales response. Taxation reform is far too important to become a political football during an election year. Our third big idea is to protect the New South Wales budget by fighting for a fairer share of the GST. Whilst we are very pleased that the Commonwealth Grants Commission abandoned its plans to slug New South Wales with a $2 billion hit to our GST revenues, we still believe the current system of redistributing the GST is flawed. The GST formula is overly complex, it does little to answer issues of equality, and it uses absurd measures to determine the GST carve-up. We simply start from the premise that New South Wales, Victoria, Queensland, Western Australia and the ACT are strong economies and should receive per capita allocations of GST, whilst recognising that Tasmania, Northern Territory and South Australia need additional funding to meet areas of social and economic need. I'm glad we won the last round of the GST carve-up fight, but it's a short-term win, and I believe we need to address the real issue of GST funding in a less reactive manner. Our fourth big idea is to end the blame game in hospitals by handing health funding to the federal government. We support a national debate over health funding. Federal Treasury projections are that by 2032, the cost for health funding in New South Wales will blow out to 55% of the state's operating budget. In today's dollar terms, that is $15 billion more than we spend today, which is more than the total spending on transport, police, roads and emergency services. We support federal government funding of hospitals, not necessarily because we question the competency of the state hospital systems, but because we believe only the federal government has the right tax base to fund such an enormous social and economic burden in the future. It is early days in terms of seeing this reform become a reality, but we support the concept of federal funding. We believe it is in the interests of all Australians.